the system, everyone's a victim. Doesn't matter if you're black or white, it hates you all.
Governor, yesterday there was a news conference at the Seneca Plaza. Some of your supporters coming out in support of the order. One of them said that you have been the victim of stalking in the last week. Can you confirm that? Can you talk about any of the violent threats that have been placed against you? We've documented numerous threats online, threats in public in the rally in Old Town last weekend.
Well, my name's Eric Pedro Sanchez. I'm from Valencia County. I'm a former Marine. I've done two combat tours to Iraq. I've done 11 trips to Iraq as a private security contractor.
Can you talk about this?
I don't know that reference point for stalking. I don't believe that that is occurring. What I can confirm, and again, not to give out too much information from the folks who protect me and all of us every day, the state police primarily. In fact, there are folks who are incarcerated today for making credible threats to my life and safety and my family. And in fact, anytime I talk about gun violence or anytime I talk about emergencies, that there's a significant uptick. And it might have been in an informal conversation about the uptick in threats. And when one party makes multiple threats online, it certainly gets to the definition of online stalking. So I certainly don't want to say that that individual was completely wrong, but rather So I certainly don't want to say that that individual was completely wrong, but rather that's not how we're treating it currently. And I think that my state police, our state police, are on it effectively. Is that a fair statement, Secretary?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Any comment on the sort of the heated rhetoric from members of the Republican Party? A sitting commissioner, Jay Block, compared you to Al-Qaeda the other day. I'm genuinely curious if you have any thoughts about the rising rhetoric among elected officials, not just random people online.
That rhetoric was directed at me and so many of my colleagues in 2016. And it has never ended when we had a shift and we had a president who invited that kind of intimidation and fear tactics to prevent elected leaders and policymakers from doing their job. I was chairing immigration reform and debate, and if you don't think that I wasn't getting a hot mess of very angry and tending towards violence, it occurred again, certainly during all of the COVID decisions, but every single time we've talked about background checks. That directed effort, I've been compared to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS, to you name it. It's a slurry of slurs. And what it just tells me is that this country, and I will fight against it, I will always have the courage, that this is not the kind of discourse I recognize in my state or my community. I have long disagreed with both Democrats, the Speaker, and I have had very challenged discussions, and so have I with every legislator here and Republicans. Yep. And I have leaned in on both parties about what they believe changes whatever issue it is that we're addressing. And I campaigned, frankly, on that I have a bipartisan aspect to getting things done. Otherwise, it doesn't have sustainability. But when members of the opposite party make those kinds of hateful, directed, spiteful, intentional, knowing that that intimidation factor could result in my direct harm, it is shocking to me today that, again, the First Amendment, would suggest that because I'm a public official, that they can increase hostility and danger and not be held accountable. And it also should give New Mexicans clarity that too many members, not all of them, Republicans both in Congress, elected leaders in the country, and in our own statewide party, offer no solutions to addressing public safety in our state, but would rather increase tensions by those reckless statements. And while not surprising, incredibly disgusting.
Governor, so you've been criticized by your own party, some Democrats as well, many you've criticized back. A few telling us, Sheriff John Allen, Chief Medina, that they were unaware of your gun ban, and they found out about it moments before your press conference last week, and it has sort of created a rift in the Democratic Party. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Well, I wouldn't describe it as a rift. So, look, this is a very gun safety and gun violence hasn't been addressed by any political party, in my view. I'm not going to speak for anyone else here. People don't address it because it takes a lot of courage to stand up. So if I made it uncomfortable, which was not the purpose, but when you try to build consensus on gun violence measures, I'm going to tell you, you cannot. More than we have in our legislature, which is a shining beacon of getting more gun violence safety measures done. Certainly, while I've been governor, than I think any other or most other states in the country. So I don't want to minimize their work. And that took a lot of courage. These were close votes and very challenging. When it's challenging to do a red flag statute, that should give everyone a sense about how hard it is to discuss this in this country. So it wasn't intended to blindside, but I didn't have the time in a crisis to build consensus. I'm also willing, on behalf of the country, apparently, with Democrats and Republicans, is sometimes when you push the buttons of so many individuals, it's a button that needed to be pushed because it's just been lying dormant. It should not be dormant. If I have to be the only person in that context, in that public health order then, around the country that will stand up for children and families, so be it. And I hope that my colleagues, who I'm sure, because they're working right now, are all working together, but outside of the political references here, share my outrage that we should not lose any more children in the state. 3 children a month die from gun violence in New Mexico. 3. If that doesn't make you feel a sense of urgency to test every question, to push every evidence-based, and remember, guns on the streets results in gun violence. It is evidence-based. We're clear. Somebody has to ask the questions, and it provides meaningful legal tools for the legislature to debate in the next session. So I'm not mad at anyone. Maybe the hateful situations that cause more risk in our communities. But being mad isn't a solution either, taking it personally. I did, highlight that being mad at me is not a solution. And before you do that, you should have credible ideas about moving forward. And I don't mind that I stayed that, I got to defend the positions that I take. Otherwise, then they're not real positions. I can defend them. But there's no anger or animosity from me towards any elected leader who's going to have to be part of the solutions, minus that kind of rhetoric. So we're going to get it done. And thank you for asking the question.
Go ahead, please. You spoke about individuals anywhere engaging in illicit drug use, drug deals. Does this mean that drug arrests are now felonies?
They've always been felonies. So if you have a small amount in possession, and weren't using, that can be, depending upon the issue and the arrest. So I'm speaking in very broad generalities, as not a public defender or a DA. So those questions are certainly going to be much better addressed by the experts day to day and the criminal courts who do this every day. But we have not been arresting individuals who are breaking the law. And I will tell you what I believe has been the reason. That there are so many other things that we need to respond to without a coordinated response. That if someone, a third party, an innocent third party, isn't likely to be carjacked, kidnapped, shot at, that we're addressing those issues. As a mother and grandmother, thank you. I would have made the same decision without being a trained law enforcement officer. With the coordinated presence, we have, I think, significant, dangerous criminals hiding in plain sight. And we are seeing a growing drug use and substance abuse epidemic. And we must get our arms around both. And so that's why we are going to do that. And that's why we're going to make sure that the resources, including manpower, exist for bookings, jails, and behavioral health, all of the above. We must address that. And I would also just state that I think that communities, because crime is an epidemic, in my view, all around the country, certainly has been stated by many others. I'm not the first. I think we're the first state to address it as such. Because New Mexico is a state with real leadership, even when it's hard. And those jurisdictions are now going to say to you that focusing on their violent crime and not paying enough attention to the illicit drug use in their communities has caused untenable tensions and problems in general quality of life and public safety. And this is a community and a state that's going to get that addressed.
But the question has to be asked and answered. How do we go from reactive police work to proactive police work? Case in point, we have limited resources in law enforcement. I just checked with a field lieutenant at the state police that I know very well, and he told me yesterday he had an officer at MDC. 4 hours it took him to book somebody. That officer to book somebody. That pulls that officer off the roads. Why? Well, quite frankly, for a good reason, booking was full. But again, the governor's asked us for solutions, and we're going to come up with them. How do we speed those processes up to get those officers back out in the streets in the metro to be proactive? Being reactive, great, you respond to calls for service, but it doesn't prevent what we need prevented. Being proactive does.
I think we have time for two more, and I'd like to hear from Robert.
Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, Governor, for doing this. I want to confirm the public health order has been amended to allow open and concealed, but not in public parks or playgrounds, correct, ma'am?
Correct.
And then can you say, was this in part your alteration of this because of the response, be it legally, the AG's office, just people saying, this may not be.
It had nothing to do with what people, including experts like the AG, who is responsible for this area of work, and others, but it was in listening to the debate in court. I was very pleased that the court discussion on both sides and restated, I think is the best way to couch that, these are my words, not the judge's, but that a restatement that there was no disagreement in that courtroom that gun violence is a problem. And there was no disagreement, my words again, in that courtroom, that this doesn't warrant a public health emergency or a crisis discussion and definition. No one. Which tells me that in the question itself, finding the framework that will pass legal muster is there. And I was challenged to find it, and I think we have. Now, we'll see. If I have in the October full hearing, if this isn't enough, then we'll go to the legislature and see what will hold muster. But in an emergency, I think this is warranted and valid. And again, I'll have to see. Like I have always said in any number of these efforts, if a judge disagrees with us, then I follow that court order. I do believe in the rule of law, but I also believe in the role of a fact finder. If I bring you a set of facts that's different than a set of facts from someplace else, and somebody challenges my interpretation of the facts and its application in a response, that's exactly where you go. You go to a judge to ask who's right in that context. So we're going to find out in October, Robert.
Thank you, Governor.
We'll just do one more.
Now, Governor, you've done obviously a lot of interviews since you first announced this public health order, the original one. Now, you've said that there are science and facts behind that it's concealed carry and open carry that are responsible for these crimes. What science and facts do you have that kind of prove that?
Well, if that was interpreted by something I said, I would. This is a great chance to correct the record. I don't believe I ever said that. I said guns. The number of guns on the street, there is plenty of evidence. And we're happy to give you 5 remarkable pieces around the country. So that's fairly well established in the same way that we say the evidence about early childhood is completely evidence-based. The arguments about that have been put to bed. That's how you have laws, like being able to take into custody a firearm under certain domestic violence situations, right? That's why those laws exist, or universal background checks, or waiting periods, all of those, because the number of firearms does increase risk and public safety issues. So that's the data that I was talking about having a pause even 8 days ago. You can't tell the good guys from the bad guys, and I don't want to make that a gender-biased issue. We have women who are certainly part of this criminal element, and I don't want to minimize that. But I say that statement that it is, so if you're a police officer or if you're just in the public and I see someone that maybe doesn't look to me like they should be outside with a firearm, I think I talked about the situation where somebody said that they were on a bike trail by the Bosque, and someone who appeared, to be in the teens, maybe 19, maybe 18, maybe 15, with an automatic weapon, a rifle, laying across their chest, who was having trouble even sitting, and whether or not that was a legal or unlegal situation and what they do in that moment. What I will tell you is, in their communication with me, they were terrified. So trying to reduce fear, intimidation, terror, and increase public safety, that was the intent based on just guns generally, not to open carry and concealed. And last thing about concealed for everyone here, not everybody probably in the legislature voted for that concealed carry. That's tougher because the data, and I haven't checked the most recent data, but when legislatures across the country were passing concealed carry, there really wasn't data to say that that made you any less safer. So if that might have been part of that background for your question, it's good work. And I haven't seen any new data that says that's shifted, but it's firearms in general.
Can I ask you quickly about your trip to Taiwan? For next
There's a
week?
trip to Taiwan? There's a trip to Taiwan?
goes? I think it goes.
Yes, we've been invited. We've been invited to participate. I'll be there with another governor at least to talk about the developments in companies in manufacturing, intelligent manufacturing, and related business endeavors who are very interested in the West, Southwest, and particularly in New Mexico. And we believe that during and immediately after that trip, we'll be able to announce some exciting new economic development news. But it's an honor to be invited to participate in their Taiwan-U.S. Business Day. And I'm one of the featured speakers about what New Mexico's doing right to encourage this kind of international business ventures and these companies coming to our state. So I'm excited about that opportunity.